You are listening to the North American Kings podcast, your traditional masculinity training ground. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski, founder of North American Kings LLC, a leadership development company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. As we all know, the man brand has taken an absolute beating over the past few decades, and it's our mission to change that. We're going to do that by helping you join the fight to reclaim traditional masculine values. Welcome to headquarters. Training starts now. Welcome back to the training ground, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. We've got a very packed and fun show planned for you today, along with some tips that you can use in both your professional and your personal lives, so please stay tuned. Having said that, let's get started. As always, we want to thank our friends at Naked Armor Razors and Wet Shave Gear for making this show possible. King Arthur, the paragon of kings, shaved with a straight razor, so why shouldn't you? Single-bladed razors are making a comeback because they offer something that multi-bladed competitors forgot along the way. I want a smooth shave, not necessarily a close one. And that's going to be the difference. It's a very subtle one. The first blade on multi-bladed razors pull the hair out before the second and third blades do the cutting. Now, while this may sound like it's better, when the hair slips back under the skin, because that's where its resting position is, you'll notice little red bumps and irritation set in. Who wants that? I want to look like I know what I'm doing when I'm shaving. Now, while the side walls provide some protection from nicks and cuts, believe you me, they can still take away skin. Sure, a straight razor will require a little more dexterity from you up front, but the quality of your shave is absolutely worth it. To help you get started, my listeners can enjoy a 15% discount off of anything in their online store. All you need to do is enter coupon code KINGS15 at checkout. Don't wait to enjoy the highest quality shave you'll ever give yourself. NakedArmorRazors.com. Now, before we get rolling, I'd like to take a second to elevate someone to the pedestal of manhood. This story was in the news in a few places this week, and I've got to say, it's awesome. Today.com, May 4th, Ocean City, Maryland. A 5-car collision on Route 90 bridge occurs at 2:45 in the afternoon. Amongst the wreckage is a crew cab truck that's hanging over the edge of this bridge. If you want to look up this article, it'll be in the show description, but this picture will just let you know that you're looking at the right thing. So this truck is wrapped partially around the guardrail. It hit so hard. And during the accident, a 2-year-old girl who is strapped firmly in her car seat is ejected out of the vehicle. Now, no article specifies where her car seat was situated, but while this situation does seem dire, believe me, it gets a lot worse. If you haven't heard this one, it's incredible. The 2-year-old girl strapped to her seat doesn't land in the road. So let me just be clear. I'm not saying she was strapped in her seat and then she was ejected from the seat. The seat itself gets ejected from the car, right? So but here's the problem. She didn't just launch into the road. She gets launched over the edge of the bridge and down into Assawoman Bay. For those people without kids, especially 2 years old, they don't have the finger strength, to pinch. They don't have the finger strength enough to actually get themselves out of these car seats. I mean, they're extremely secure. I mean, that's why we like them. But the fact that she's still strapped in, but somehow the seat gets launched is going to be something the investigators look into thoroughly. That shouldn't happen. And if you don't know how to install your car seats, a little aside for folks, if you have kids or young kids and you don't know how to, and you're not confident that you've strapped the seat in properly, this is what we're trying to avoid. So if you do need assistance, go to any local police station or a hospital, and people there will actually help you install this to standard, and they'll do it absolutely for free. They do it as a public service, and we thank them for that. But back to the story. Just as this little girl is launched, a good Samaritan leaps over the edge of the bridge and dives down 25 foot plus down to the water below. And after reaching the little girl, local boatmen actually fished the pair of them out of the water and brought them to the shore where paramedics were waiting. And I keep saying Good Samaritan for a reason. Dude tells officials that he doesn't want to be identified and then just walks away. Like, was this guy an angel? I mean, that doesn't happen these days. I mean, kudos to this guy for passing up his 15 minutes of fame. Right? Clearly, he deserves his accolades. Like, local officials, according to another article on the same subject matter, stated that the little girl surely would have died if he hadn't jumped in right after her like he did. Now, we've mentioned before that people sometimes freeze in clutch situations, even more so when they don't know the people involved. Now, I can only imagine the horror experienced by this child's parents as they struggled to find out where their little girl was because they were likely still strapped into the vehicle. Saved by a lone stranger. Like, that's right out of a comic book. Whoever this guy is, and we can confirm that it is a man, that they did put that detail in the articles, every one of them. Whoever this guy is, for putting your life at risk to save that of an unknown child with zero thought of reward, put this man on the pedestal. He deserves it. So on to today's riveting subject matter. And this is a personal interest to me, so thank you for going along this journey with me. But on today's episode, I want to talk about leadership, manhood, and political capital. It's about time, right? Like, after last week's episode, which was a little bit serious, but rightfully so, I think it's right to go over some things that will set us apart as men and as leaders. And I want to break down something that's pretty hot in current events right now. And this subject's going to slide into the political capital discussion. So please, again, stay tuned. This all will connect, I promise. Aaron Rodgers, my quarterback, is lobbying to leave the Green Bay Packers. Now, there are a few reasons why I actually want this to happen. But before we jump into that, let me get some backstory out of the way. For those who don't know Aaron's story, Aaron Rodgers got destroyed during the 2005 NFL draft. In 2005, he's one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the draft. His dream team, being a Cal University player and a California kid, was to play for the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, I think most kids in that Bay region absolutely love that team, and rightly so. I always encourage, if you guys move from place to place like I have, like all throughout your childhood, like I did, I encourage you, like, keep your team, but I encourage you to have your kids root for the home team. Like, I don't believe that if, like, I'm a Packer fan, and I will be for forever. I'm pretty sure. I want my kids to be Cincinnati Bengals fans so that they can assimilate into their surroundings. I think that's healthy, right? And as such, this guy who went to school in California, grew up in California, wanted to play for the 49ers. And what joys he must have felt going into a draft where his team needs a quarterback, and they have the first overall pick, and he's one of the top 2, arguably the most well-developed quarterback of that draft. It seemed like something like a match made in heaven. And just like Big Mike McCarthy was actually the assistant coach at the time, so and actually really liked him. And he'll end up coaching the Packers one day, and Aaron Rodgers will be his quarterback. So again, we can just see the stars aligning. Now, for those who don't understand or follow football, this is an incredible setup, right? But things didn't go as planned. Aaron gets passed up for his chief rival in the entire exercise. From there, it's a slide down the charts. I've got a video up in the show description here where you can watch this whole thing happen. It's devastating. But this is where you get to see Aaron's temperament and his manhood right away. I mean, I've attached the video. You can see for yourselves. Take a look at his interviews during that clip. People were describing the situation like it was something from reality TV. You know, cameras were on him the entire time. The press is asking questions to themselves. Like, what happened to this guy? Why isn't anybody picking him? Where will he end up? Like, what do you think of yourself? And they started asking this 21-year-old kid whose dreams are being pulverized right in front of him on national television. They're asking him most of these questions, like to his face. Hey, why do you think that you weren't good enough? Why are your dreams being smashed right now? And his composure is stellar. And that's a hallmark of manhood, and I will give him credit where credit's due. Now, we haven't discussed this in detail, but one thing that men do need to do in order to be considered men by everyone, I'm just articulating these things. Most people won't tell you anymore, right? But men are supposed to be strong. Now, yeah, that makes sense. But back when we were hunters and gatherers, that meant primarily we needed to be physically strong. That makes sense, right? That's not a leap of anybody's thought, right? But we don't openly talk about this much, but there's an expectation that men also be emotionally strong, right? And it's about strength of will. Now, what is that? That is the ability to do what is logical, what's necessary, what's right, etc., rather than cave to our emotional responses. Now, most men do this by just shutting out emotions, which isn't necessarily the healthiest thing to do either. But we talked about emotional regulation, about taking that emotion, recognizing it, and setting aside our reactions for a moment so that we can logically get through a situation. That's what we need to be able to do. And Aaron Rodgers has been able to do this his entire career. We were able to get a front row seat of how he handles that kind of pressure from day one. But his nightmare wasn't about to end. So 25th pick, Aaron Rodgers goes to the Green Bay Packers, where he becomes the heir apparent to the legendary Brett Favre. Right? Like, that's a great opportunity. If you're not going to go be the starter, why not go learn from a legend? Well, unfortunately, Brett didn't really care. And I'll be honest with you, I am not a Brett Favre fan. I came in to Wisconsin at the end of Brett Favre's career, and objectively, at that point, yeah, he had a Super Bowl. I wasn't impressed, with his results. And I'm not saying he wasn't a great football player. I'm not saying he wasn't a great quarterback, but I was not impressed by everything there, right? And we can get into that. And I've destroyed Brett Favre fans in Wisconsin. So the most fierce of them, I've destroyed them with these arguments. But it's usually assumed that when a rookie player comes to a team, the veteran players will do some small amount of mentoring. All right? Now, Brett's got his excuses, and Brett doesn't think that this happened, but Brett Favre was not about to start doing that. In fact, I've got another interview on the on Brett's reaction in the show description, and you can watch him say it. It was, quote, not his job to mentor Aaron Rodgers. Awesome. Now, there are many potential reasons for that. According to Brett, it wasn't because he viewed Aaron as a threat. His feelings were that, he doesn't know that starting quarterbacks like himself are being paid to give insight into what they're doing. He didn't owe the kid anything outside of being polite. He wasn't rude, but he never turned him away, apparently, but he wasn't going to mentor this kid. Now, I don't know, I don't know, but it sort of shows the true colors of a man, especially when you find out later that he's sending illicit photos of himself to an ex-Maxim Playboy model who's now a sideline reporter for the Jets while you're their quarterback. I mean, you can kind of see the writing on the wall if you really look for it. Right. And again, I'm a Wisconsin transplant. So I moved to Wisconsin in high school and stayed there through college. So I didn't have the emotional attachment to the Packers that my peers did. So in my opinion, I could see this stuff a little bit more objectively. So Aaron Rodgers is sidelined during the draft, and during his formative years as a second string quarterback, effectively didn't really learn much from Brett Favre because Brett Favre didn't care. Fast forward, Brett Favre retires a few times. Aaron still playing it cool. Hey, you know what? we'll find out when we find out. It was his response. And I watched these. I watched those very specifically because I couldn't wait for Brett to retire. And Brett retires, and he can't commit to coming and playing for the Packers. And this was during a time where I had a budding interest in this. So for Favre, he can't commit. And the Packers at that point were recruiting people, and they got a very young team. Now, from a business standpoint, you need solid leadership that's willing to sit there and take the reins. If you got a young team that doesn't know what to do, they need that leadership. That's the whole point. Brett was just there to be Brett, selfish dude. So this was during. So again, with his waning commitment, the team decides on one crucial factor. This is the whole thing. This is what broke the legacy that was Brett Favre. Aaron Rodgers must start in a few real regular season games. Now, this is where I touch on conjecture. Okay, I've mentioned some opinions, but I'm gonna make like a statement. I think that a lot of this thing went down because Brett Favre didn't want to lose his streak. He had an amazing #1 record going on of consecutive regular season game starts. The Packers were going to end that. Now, the Packers then made a business decision. With Aaron Rodgers opening up games and becoming a non-starter for Brett Favre, the team decides to cash in on their Aaron Rodgers investment, and they go with this guy who could lead the team and grow them. And look where it got them. They did awesome. Now, the thing is, Aaron Rodgers has had the same cycle of performance that Brett Favre did. Now, this is where I kind of hope that Aaron leaves. All right? You've got one Super Bowl relatively early in their tenure as a starter. Same thing with Brett Favre. Then several years of getting close but not quite there, and then boom, I'm retiring. Now, it looks like the same thing is playing out here. I mean, I think that this is really the reason Aaron is power playing right now. He wants things changed or he's out. Now, the reason any of this is relevant to the show is because of an exchange that we saw from Terry Bradshaw. Now, Terry's a legendary football player. He's a commentator right now, but Terry Bradshaw is not happy with Aaron Rodgers right now. His opinion on this matter were largely due to an assumption that all this was about the Packers drafting Jordan Love. And that is, they've been, the Packers and even Aaron have been pretty, we haven't heard a lot of definitive, asks out of this, right? So again, we're just assuming all things possible, right? But this quote was an assumption. It was based on that assumption. So a quote from Yahoo Sports article attached to the show description, with him being that upset, quote, with him being that upset shows me how weak he is. Hall of Famer quarterback Terry Bradshaw said Monday in an appearance with Moose and Maggie on WFAN. Who the heck cares who you draft? I mean, he's a 3-time MVP in the league, and he's worried about this guy they drafted last year at #1? And for him to be upset, my God, I don't understand that. Pittsburgh drafted Mark Malone, #1, and Cliff Stout in the 3rd and 4th round. I had them coming at me from all angles. I embraced it because when we went to practice, I was worried about those guys, or I wasn't worried about those guys. They didn't scare me a bit. So I don't understand why he's so upset at Green Bay. And if they fire the general manager, he'll come back? Are you kidding me? Really? Aaron, that's where it is? Here's what I do, Bradshaw said. I wouldn't budge. Let him gripe, let him cry, retire. He's 38. Go ahead and retire. See you later. I mean, I'm really strong about stuff like that, and it makes him look weak. In my way of looking at it, it makes him look weak. End quote. Now, for Aaron's entire career, he's played everything extremely cool. He's even been able to project his emotional strength to an entire state of people. I've seen this happen. Right? And, it's not, it isn't a pleasant one at all times, the Packers fan base. So for the quarterback to just send waves of calm was just amazing to witness. Aaron made waves when he projected his calm to the media, and you guys will have heard this if you're into sports, where Aaron Rodgers said to a media crew and to the people of Wisconsin, relax. Now, I was in Wisconsin when this dropped, and believe me, you could feel people chill out a bit. It was absolutely nuts. It was amazing to experience that, like, as a transplant rather than a native Scotty. I'm telling you, it was absolutely nuts. So Aaron started losing his sway a few years back when a Republican voting Wisconsin, when Aaron started dabbling in politics, where he got into that little spat with President Trump. Wisconsin is relatively divided, but we turned on Aaron Rodgers when he did his whole stand in solidarity thing in response to Trump's claims about some athletes. Now, from there, it's been some lackluster performances and injuries. And as a fan, the organization always seemed to lose steam or even choke like during late season or late postseason games. That's not a good look either. So why would the Packers want a solid backup? Well, the last time Aaron Rodgers did go out for a long stretch because he broke his collarbone, we got Brett Hundley, who barely won in OT over the Baker Mayfield Browns. And he was excited. That's not a situation we want to be in. At that point, almost losing to the Browns was unacceptable. Now, Hundley showed us that we had no depth at quarterback, but it also showed us that we don't have much depth in other places at all. Now, Terry Bradshaw calling another famed quarterback weak is speaking to the manhood of the situation. All things being relatively equal between these guys, now we're talking mentality rather than physicality. And I've got to give him some credit for that. Aaron usually dominates his will. And I mentioned before, mental fortitude and strength of will is what makes the man. And it seems like now, for the first time, Aaron's losing that battle. Now, personally, I would hope to see him go. I think this will be what helps the Packers lose. I think that they'll lose their haze, and I hope they start making some organizational decisions that make it so a quarterback doesn't need to be the only reason you're winning games. Now, this Aaron Rodgers stuff also has something to do with political or social capital. I've called it political capital for a long time now, but just know that these are two commonly used titles for the exact same thing. I'll be honest, this is probably the most important subject that I've taught any supervisor that has ever worked for me. We'll get to the mechanics of it in just a minute, but this can help make or break men and leaders. Before I digress further, I have to address the obvious question. What is political capital? From a June 2001 article from the Harvard Business Review titled How to Invest in Social Capital by Lawrence Prusak and Don Cohen. They say that social capital is the name for the relationships that make organizations work effectively. Now, that definition works, but I think it's a bit vague for our purposes, and I couldn't find a ton on this. So let's try this, or let's try this example, or this definition. Political capital is a construct for measuring one's perceived goodwill to those in their sphere of influence. I think that works. Now, let's look at that definition in detail. This is a way of measuring something that's socially constructed. Now, I've met folks in business in my world who couldn't commit to anything that's vague. Now, in normal situations, that's entirely the right response. I mean, I don't want to commit to vagueness. However, when you have a known social construct, that's a little bit different. And that will actually tell you what that person's worth, right? If you were to ask someone, how did it go? And their answer was, well, it's hard to tell. How is it supposed to go? Or some other non-committal response. It's a nonsense. And that's important to understand in that person. In business and out in the real world, our jobs are, as men, are to be able to feel things out. You never have all the information. That's a fact of life. You never have it all. And even when people do, this is the trick that people don't understand. People haven't thought it through this far enough. Again, I'm not saying I'm a genius. I'm not saying that people are dumb. I'm saying that people haven't taken the next step to ask that logical question, because when they ask that logical question, they will get to this answer. What were you going to do if you had all the right information? There is still the chance that you still make the wrong call. Right? So some people do not make the right call in any situation. They might get super close, and that's good enough. It really is. I've mentioned before, you get to 80% of correct, and most people are happy. That's perfectly fine. But even with all the defined, laid out, correct, immediate answers that you're going to need, if you had all that, people still make the wrong call. So if you are stuck in that labyrinth, that trap of thinking that you need all the information, you are thinking in the wrong way. And I'm going to make that definitive statement. I don't care how you feel about this. You don't need all of the information. Get what you need of the situation and gut check it. Okay? Whatever that is, did that feel right? So you need the ability to resolve to profess a general feel for a given situation. You won't understand this concept until you can make that leap. I'm sorry. It's a social construct, so it should be understood that there's no definitive value. And people who grasp this, or who fail to grasp this, they should give you pause. So I'm going to say don't trust these people, but you cannot rely on these people because they will fall into that trap every time. They will wait until they have too much information and they won't know what to do with it. They've already proven the ability not to be able to sift through what's necessary and what's not. That's not a good starting point. Right? So our starting point is being able to understand that this is a vague concept. Okay? Now, this vague feeling for one's perceived goodwill to who or whatever. Okay? Yes, I'm talking about two things. One, it's perceived. Right? Now, I also mentioned to one, this could be political capital. Could be someone's perception of you. It could be an organization. It could be a dog. It could be your kid. Something has a perception of you. They have a perception of what? How much goodwill you've brought. Now, you may have caught on to this already. And for those who haven't, it's okay. We're going to say it right here. Perception is subjective. That's not a secret to anybody. Actual value is a component of this. So if real progress is something that is important, but this concept is far less about the actual performance, the result that you provide, than of its perceived value. Okay, that is subjective. Now, this is paramount to the entire concept and will present itself in some actual functionality. Now, the best way that I have found to think about this is to really compare it to golf. Right? Every hole you shoot in golf has a par value, say a par 5 or par 4. That means if you're swinging that, if you make it on a par 4, if you take 4 swings at the golf ball and get it in the hole, then on a par 4, your value there is 0. The value of par in golf is 0. Now, if you hit that goal, you've neither lost nor gained on your overall score. That's good. That's acceptable. That's average. That's what we expect. Someone 6 shots under par is doing extremely well versus someone who is at par which is effectively 0. So keeping track can be even more simple than that. Just aggregate. So I'm thinking over the course of a month, how many times have I provided more value than I cost? If over half the time I'm actually doing better than costing or doing better than 0, great. It can be that simple. Now, with every interaction, was there something gained in goodwill? That's That's kind of the point. You help an old lady across the street. Now, for brief moments, you've gained something to those who have experienced your interaction with that woman. You've gained value. You've gained goodwill. That guy's a nice guy. Awesome. To gain or lose political capital is either a net benefit or a net problem for those around you. Now, also, just, I don't want to say focus on this, and we'll touch on this in a minute, but the question is going to be then, do you feel how much political capital you gained in that interaction? You helped an old lady across the street. She's not going to reward you with $1 million, right? Because all you did was help her across the street. It was a nice thing to do, right? She might repay that with a smile or, compliment or whatever, but she's making it even because that's effectively what you brought to the table is help, a little bit of goodwill. Does that make sense? We'll get into some other examples here in just a minute. Now, I wasn't very well received at a company that I've worked for, right? I'm not sure if I've talked about these folks or not, but in any case, some of it was culture and some of it was my own doing. Now, I was a high roller with regards to political capital, which is a crazy thing to engage in. I'm telling you, I'm encouraging you not to do this. I'd get some crazy major things accomplished, and then I'd say something that would require some explaining, right? Now, one of the best things I ever did was teach my eventual successor the things that he lacked when applying to my job at first. So I beat my own right-hand man. I beat him out for my job, and he would actually work for the company for a while. And actually, he's actually one of my best friends right now, like to this day. Even though I don't live I don't live there anymore, right? Now, the reason I mention all this is I was banking, I was making a lot of political capital, and I was spending a lot. So the volatility there, had its drawbacks. Now, I taught him about political capital after my successor, after I officially took over my position from the gentleman that was leaving. However, our first interaction was actually, that first transaction was far earlier in our relationship. Now, it started off with one big win. And the situation arose with an employee that my successor had a long history with. And he couldn't seem to get any real discipline on this guy to stick. Now, the olive branch got extended to me. My successor said, "Hey, can you help me with this?" You could help me here, maybe. He still didn't know how much he could trust me, didn't know much about my abilities as a manager. That's fair. And he should, right? But he reached out. Heck yes. I was absolutely pumped for that. For every one of my faults, I am a great tactical coach in this situation. So he teed up something that was going to happen regardless. Now, I gave my successor instructions about, only to observe. So he was sitting in the room. I just want you to watch so that we could discuss what moves I made, because they are moves. I discussed what moves I made in this conversation to kind of bring the person where I wanted them. Now, when the employee reported to us, we went through the classics. The employee didn't see what he did was wrong. So I went through the grow method. I said, "Hey, this is what you should have done," right? And the guy acknowledges that. Boom, here's what you did do, and here's all the proof. Now, what happened? Guy lays everything out on the floor. Then we pivot to, why was it just him that's being disciplined? We don't discipline everyone this way. And I said, well, I just got here, and this is how we're going to play things from here on out. So it's not just you, but we're not talking about this guy or this guy or this guy. We're talking about you, who I have documented proof that there was a mistake here. And it looks like there's a history of it. So let's get this straight. Let's not do this anymore. And around and around and around we went. Now, we finally got to the heart of this. After discussions and questions and pivoting and letting this guy advance and then backing in so that he would eventually ask or say an answer to a question I knew was coming. And, you get them to a point where they can't refute what you're saying because what you're saying is true. If during a coaching, if you guys discover that there's actual proof that the person did something for either a reason, or if they did it for some altruistic, like there's a reason they did it, or there was an actual mistake in your perception and they didn't do anything wrong. Perfect. You get to apologize, say, hey, here's the standard. Cool. We're aligned. You learned something, and then you're going to make sure that everybody knows that this is the right thing to do. In any case, you can get out of that if they give you real information. Your job is to discover whether it's real or not. Now, we got to the heart of this, really, and it wasn't that he was not doing the right thing. His response to a question was, this job isn't my passion. Victory. I got to the pure truth. I got to what this guy's real problem was. This guy didn't like his job. I mean, I couldn't blame him. I don't want to point out who this was, so I'm just going to say his passion was not what he was doing. And again, they were so far apart. Yeah, it makes sense that you would be miserable here. But if it wasn't his dream job, then it wasn't his dream job. He was a toxic employee because of this. However, as my old mentor used to say, and still does, you choose to come to work every day. That means you agreed to do the job today. You walked in. Now, I said as much to this employee. My successor, who wasn't sold on me before this meeting, was stunned that we got this coaching to stick. We talked to the employee, let him know that it doesn't matter if this isn't your passion. You need this job, right? You have a family to provide for. And of course, employee is nodding. He's got a wife and kids. Yes, you need this job. You need to provide this job. You want overtime. Why? Because you need to pay the bills. I'm just nodding. Yes, this guy needed to perform, or it wasn't going to be a matter of him doing his passion or not. It was going to be a matter of whether he can feed his kids or not. And unfortunately, sometimes these conversations go that way, where you're telling someone that they absolutely need to just nut up and do the job because they need it. Their circumstances dictate that they do the job. So, dude needs to feed his family. Dude's got to do this job correctly, or he's not going to be able to do that, unfortunately. And you have to have the resolve to just to make that happen, because he was a poisonous person to the morale of the entire plant. I didn't help in a lot of situations, but I'll be honest with you. I leave. Dude's still there. They still feel the thing. Dude leaves. And my successor has told me that the morale is improving drastically. Awesome. So, dude accepts his document, states that he would do better. He signs it. We copy. He improves marginally over the course of many issues, and which is usually the case. It's never like, I'm going to be your best employee immediately. It never happens that way. So I gained heaps of political capital with my successor. Never, even with the guy I replaced, had my successor ever seen this person really engage or discuss that, or accept coaching after years of working with this toxic individual. Now, I was able to reinvest that capital again and again and again with my successor. Again, he's one of my best friends now, because he and I would trade political capital left and right. And we got some crazy good things done, right? Even with the social perception of me, right? That was not going to last. And actually, that capital pool flows both ways. It's a constant give and take. Spending political capital takes place when you have to spend influence in order to get something done. I told you I was a high roller. To get stuff done, I had to spend and spend and spend and spend. And with ready participants, the cost can sometimes be relatively low. You ask certain people, sometimes I've made deals where I will ask somebody else to have a conversation with somebody else, because I know the political capital it would cost me to ask this intermediary to get it done will actually net less political capital invested in the conversation and get more things done, because there are relationships built there. And that avenue, even though it's longer, it costs us a lot less. So keep those things in mind. With ready participants, again, the cost goes down. It doesn't take much job to get just a little push to get that done. Now, if you ever feel that you have to return the favor, if you ever get that itching feeling of, hey, you know what, I'll pay you back, or I'll make sure that I owe you one. You've spent political capital. And that's not a bad thing. That piece is easy. The understanding when you've spent. Right? Now, here are some things about political capital that may not be so readily understandable. You can spend or invest somebody else's political capital. Now, this gets tricky. This can go either up or down the chain of command. Now, let's say you spend a favor that's already owed to you. Every now and then this happens where I need to serve up like an employee in order to get something accomplished like right away. Something will come up that's germane to my employee's daily work. If I hear about a problem that he's going to be involved in anyway, I'll volunteer his time. And it's just generally dudes in this situation, so it's not boy or girl related. But I'll volunteer his time to the task on his behalf. Now, why would I do that? So listen to that example. My employee was going to need to be involved in this problem. They're gonna need to be a part of the solution. I spent his time and assigned him the duties. Now he's going to be in charge of the thing that he was going to be involved with anyway. So the immediate investment will be paid back when the job gets done. Also, I'll get a little kickback from the person who originally requested it since I made it happen, quote unquote. Now I give them resources that they didn't have commitment to. My employees involved with something in a more direct route and can get things done quicker than having to be involved in meetings and kind of waiting for other people to do it. I give him a chance to earn political capital for getting something done by investing a small amount of his time on something that he was going to have to be involved with regardless of his feelings. Everybody wins. That's a great situation. So as a supervisor or as a manager, you can invest in other people's money for them. You have the authority to do that. Right now, I've had that same employee invest my political capital in a positive way. Now, in talking to a higher up, this lieutenant of mine was privy to information that he hadn't been able to make me aware of before the meeting. Like, we had a hard day. We're in two different sides of the business, doing our own things. We meet up late in the afternoon and immediately walk into this meeting, have no time to like pre-plan our stuff. And we get into the thick of things and he sees a trap coming from El Jefe, right? The big kahuna, the boss, is asking me questions that I generally know the answer to. Now, my lieutenant cuts me off mid-sentence, like just as I'm about to nail it. And he cuts me off to interject some of the new information before I could potentially make a mistake. Now, luckily, I've got a great communication line with this lieutenant, meaning I understood that he wouldn't have cut me off if it wasn't entirely necessary. He saw me about to stumble, and this is trust. This is what builds a brotherhood. This is what builds a lasting relationship with you and an employee, is being able to trust each other in those situations. As a manager, as a supervisor, you need to be able to do this. Trusting your employees is a way of earning political capital between you two, like between the both of you. Now, again, I understood he wasn't going to do that if it wasn't entirely necessary. If my guy calls the ball in the air, let's talk baseball for a second rather than football. If he calls the ball, I'm running back and I'm going to catch it. He's coming from behind in the outfield. He's like, I got it. I'm the guy who's going to let him take it. He sees something that I don't. There's no arguing about it. There's no figuring it out. I trusted him. He sees something that I don't, and he's protecting me. So I let him take the shot. He crushed it in front of El Jefe. So we're good. Now, there's also an understanding. As my employee, as you are with your boss, he's able to draw on my political capital in certain situations. In that situation, in the situation before where he had information that I wasn't privy to, my employee spent my political capital by jumping in and kind of like, I don't want to say stealing my thunder, but he jumped in and pivoted and handled the situation right. That gets perceived as me running a well-efficient, a well-rounded, and a very good, effective team where my subordinates can talk up and to people that I report to and do it with competency. So in any case, like it was seen as a net positive. Right now, when speaking into groups above your weight class, it's a great example. Sometimes my employees feel they need to draw on my political capital pools. Now, my lieutenant had this happen like this week where we were speaking to a large group of my peers, quote unquote. And this made him nervous. During our breakdown afterwards, I reminded him that if he is nervous in those situations and or if I'm not there and he has to speak to people above him, that he's able to, I gave him permission effectively to utilize my influence on our collective behalf because I support his individual mission. So if we want to think about this in money terms, he doesn't feel he has the clout to go into that meeting and effectively tell people to do all this stuff. But I have political capital pools stored up. So I look at my lieutenant can then say, and even imply that we're doing this because it's our mission, and Glenn and these other higher ups are effectively saying this is what we need to do, and I'm just an agent on their behalf. I am the awesome messenger rather than part architect, which he is. He has the ability to do that if he feels it's necessary. So he can draw on my influence, my authority. He can spend my political capital in order to get some of that stuff done. Now, that's a negative interest type of investment. So if he spent my political capital, they're going to pay back a little bit more if they have to circle back to me and ask if this is really it. Yeah, absolutely. Why? You didn't trust this employee with this message? Now they're paying me that political capital back and interest for not trusting the situation, not trusting my team. Right? So in any case, it's still okay. But that's, again, something that we hadn't gone over yet because I didn't think this lieutenant didn't feel comfortable. So now he knows, but now that you know, if you have to spend your boss's political capital in order to make something land, then do it. That money or that capital will be brought back. Spending somebody else's political capital is far different than investing it. Okay, so we're talking spending, I'm talking investments back there. Like we're getting that stuff back, right? I spend political capital to make something happen for the business. That's those tangible results. I'm spending capital in order to make things happen for real. Hey, have your employee do these things. And if they do that, we'll get these results. Those real results result in the business performance getting higher. And those business performance improvements look great for us. Leadership on down to everybody. Everybody wins when those things are done. Spending with no return is very different. To spend a subordinate's political capital is tantamount to throwing them under the bus. Now, I don't recommend this ever because those transactions are highly visible. It's rare that you throw somebody under the bus that works directly for you and that doesn't come back to you at some point. I recommend you never do it. It's not a good look. You will end up losing political capital in most cases. Okay? Now, I spend upwards more often than I should have at this same, the same company way back when. My mentor would even tell me sometimes, he's like, I'd go in, he'd say, you spent a lot today. Ugh, okay. What do we need to talk about? And we'd go through the situations and we'd try. But there was a particular situation where I mouthed off to the HR manager. We were changing up an employee's schedule or training schedule. So they were going to learn a different skill before they thought they were. And the perception was that this employee wasn't going to like it. The HR manager wanted to have this big sit down and thoroughly explain the changes to the employee and kind of wanted to make a big deal out of it. I felt that this approach was more demeaning than anything else. And in fact, it outwardly treated the employee like a child. And I said as much. And at this point, I knew I wasn't going to be staying with the company. So when this back and forth ensued, I wasn't really pulling my punches as I normally would. So in the middle of this, the HR manager, actually walked down to my office from across the building and tried to make the case to me in person. Now, when anybody does this to you and you're not in an emotional state like I was at the time, like I just so frustrated with this that I just didn't want to deal with it. When somebody makes the effort to walk to you to have a conversation in person, it's one of two things. Either they don't want this conversation on the record, fair, or they're trying to avoid a misunderstanding. And truly, that's what this lady was trying to do. I wasn't having it, and I didn't really feel there was nothing. I didn't feel there was anything to clarify. I just didn't agree. So I ended up telling her that I didn't care whether the employee was going to be happy with the decision or not, because we changed it for the right reasons. It was the logical decision, and I felt that telling her this was going to be enough. Now, she agreed, and again, I went right back to, she agreed to do the job when she walked in the building this morning. And also, I reminded the HR manager that this employee was an adult and that everything we did made, again, logical movement. Going into it, the employee, we did the large sit-down meeting after I reminded the HR manager that I had 100% authority to just do this without her. And that also wasn't taken very well. But we did this meeting, and the employee even looked at the HR manager like, okay, why are we still talking about this? Like, she responded exactly how I thought she would. She's like, yeah, okay, I get it. It's a good decision. What are we still sitting here for? And went back to the plant, and I just sat back, crossed my leg. I'm like, okay, yep. Told you, it's going to be fine. No big deal. But later, a day or so later, I had my one-on-one with my boss where we sat in his office and we'd talk about things, or a coach, and I was reminded that I should always be careful using the words "I don't care." And it was the only time I'd said it in business, so I knew exactly where that came from. That's where the spend came in. My boss had to explain that situation away. He had to spend his political capital in order for me to maintain my same level of effectiveness. You can do that sometimes. It's not advisable to do it a lot. Again, my performance overall, and yours will too, your performance overall will effectively come down to how much of a benefit do you provide versus to the business, to your boss, to whoever, versus the cost of having you around. Right? If you focus on your transactions, how many wins do you have versus how many losses? Just generally, how do you feel about it? And I mean, if you do have a good feel about how you did, performance reviews should mirror this exact process. And if not, you need to calibrate how you perceive yourself. Now, this process works for men as well. Men, fathers, leaders of people. Like, this happens a lot. You can gauge your personal relationships in this same situation, in the same light as well. With my group of friends, I've got a lot of political capital saved up. And I keep generating, and I feel that that's how I've recruited such amazing people to maintain relationships with me so far. It's a select group of people because you either like my personality or you don't sometimes. And I say sometimes, there's shades. But when we get together, there's a lot of small transactions, but I feel, and you feel in those situations, that you're always gaining. Those are the people you want to continuously be around. And if you're doing this stuff in a manly way, I'm telling you, you will gain more and more and more political capital as your history progresses. Now, I can also tell you that if you do these manly things, if you take up this provide, protect, teach, and discipline mentality at its very base and begin to practice the virtues that are out there, that you will net gain on every interaction that you have. You'll be able to spend some. You'll start to see how you influence people around you in your sphere of influence. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you becoming a more traditional male will benefit not just you, but it will benefit the people around you. Anybody you touch will be able to see the goodwill that you have inspired in others. It's a very powerful thing. And if we do these things, that will be out there, that will happen. And the people who are the best at this will be spending their political capital. They'll be investing in ways to improve the areas around them, to help people make decisions. Why do I fix buddies' cars? Because that's a net value to everybody who relies on that friend being in other places. That perceived that's the value I gain, that's spent, that's earned by me by helping a friend with his car, and all it took was a couple hours worth of sweat equity. Dude pays me in goodwill. That feels amazing, right? To be truly valued as a person from another person is something that feels great. So having said that, that person gains or maintains value with everybody else because they have a consistent ride to work, or they can pick up their kids or whatever the situation is. That's a real example of how this can go. Again, beautiful thing. That's how we make a difference in the world around us. Now, I can tell you that running out of political capital isn't something you want to experience. Okay? Getting dangerously low like that usually spells disaster. Now, people, listening to you all together, and it sometimes, they'll stop. If you're a supervisor who's got no political capital, people will just outright not listen. Or, and sometimes it can get downright hostile. Now, this is where people start making mistakes. This is where people get fired. This is where people have dangerous or angry outbursts that get them fired. Like this is where things really take bad turns. If, they'll get too low on goodwill, these people, and then suddenly the well will run dry. Now, all of a sudden, you've asked for too much goodwill from others that they don't feel confident you can pay back. You cost them too much to have around. This will leave you exposed without armor in the middle of a raging melee that is the real world or business or whatever. Now, most people don't survive that. King Arthur doesn't survive battle if he goes out there without armor on. You're gonna take hits. Right? Now, this is what happened to that toxic employee in my first example. His toxic attitude kept eroding and eroding any goodwill that he had saved up. Now, eventually, he messes up, and now we're talking about a much more serious consequences than he's perceiving. And with no political credit, he started to shape up a little bit. He felt exposed. He had no political capital. He felt his job was on the line. He's still on the field without any armor to deflect the little blows that would otherwise just ping right off of him. Right? On the opposite side of that coin, there is a cap to how much political capital you can have available. If you don't spend it, it's, you start devaluing. Someone's never going to get it back, right? You're just going to keep accumulating, doing people favors. You're not going to get any net benefit. And it's okay to invest your political capital. It's okay to ask for favors, for people to help you get things done. It will make you more effective by effectively delegating in a very tactful way. You will be able to actually go out there and get more things done by, hey, you know what? I do all these things for you. Can you do this little thing for me? And that person will feel that all of a sudden they're engaged with you. Instead of just being a taker, you've empowered them to provide you a benefit. You're enabling them, if they're a dude, to provide. If women provide too, but men, we know how we feel about that. Yes, I'm helping my boss out. Great. So you're able to pull those people in and out. Right? But there is a cap to how much you can save. Your amount of influence over a business, an organization, or even a person will only extend so far. Sometimes it comes down to faith. I used to tell my folks, when in doubt, you can count on third shift. And that's where we were working when I was a supervisor. And that was true. We'd get crazy changeovers. We'd get washdowns. We'd be responsible for figuring things out that were kind of off. We're in charge of fixing things and following through on the previous day's schedule, all without having all the day shift resources available. And we got things done. We were able to figure those things out. That was our value. However, there is a limit to how much we actually could do. We've only got so many good producing hours in a day. There were only so many resources available to us. So getting extra things done might take longer than if like day shift just decided to do it. So there was a natural cap to, like how many ways we could generate favors, or that goodwill. Your cap also depends on your position. Believe me, as a production manager, I could generate oodles of political capital, essentially, even because we just produced well. If you have a well-running shift in manufacturing and you somehow just get it, where you have a great day and your people are producing, you don't have a lot of downtime, you're making money, making money, and outside, and you don't even need to spend anything in order to generate that. Where, on the other side, you've got a small army that you can draw on with people that you're building relationships with over and over and over again. So let me tell you, like, you can gain large amounts of influence by being an effective manager in that way. Take my position now. I'm a continuous improvement manager. I'm a support function for all that other stuff. I have 3 employees, not 90. Right? On top of that, I can't tell people to do much. Why can't I tell them? They don't report to me. At the end of the day, they're going to feel the necessity to go ask their boss, hey, this guy asked me to do stuff that's not my normal stuff. Can I do that? And when that person says yes, then, ultimately there's a 3-way transaction there. But what I'm getting at is that, it costs me time and influence in order to make those things happen. It's humbling to switch to a role like this. And the successful folks will find a way to lead this way. The best people are able to do this by getting things done just by spending influence, rather than you must do this because I'm your boss to go do it. And even as a direct supervisor, you want to avoid that. Do it because I say so to other adults. You can do that to kids. And actually, it's like science has proven it's healthy to do that to kids. It helps them understand their place. Kids like structure and rules, and obedient kids are proven to be happier and more developed kids. To adults, it's far different. They don't feel that. They don't feel the benefits of that. They're done adjusting. So I would avoid that too. But it is a ton of small interactions. We're spending very little in order to save a lot for when I need it. That's what support functions do. Now, the last point I have on this, according to an article by Hans Westland of the Swedish Institute for Growth Policy Studies titled Implications of Social Capital for Businesses in the Knowledge Economy, Theoretical Considerations. Political capital has a shelf life. It states, while social capital is a product of both intentional investments and an unintended byproduct of those activities, the unintended happen, unquote, so let me stop there. So you've got the unintended consequences, that is the perception of you spending capital, and you also have the results. So the results are peppered in here. So let me requote. So while the social capital is a product of both intentional investments and unintended byproducts of other activities, social capital is worn out if it is not maintained. And it's also stated that social capital is a sunk cost that might become obsolete. True point. And like the opposite, again, maintaining social capital means, again, it's got a shelf life. So you need to spend it and you need to gain it back. You need to spend it and you need to gain it back. All right. Like it's going to spoil. So if you can't use it, spend it on something, and spend it wisely so that you can, again, recoup those benefits there. Again, Glenn is a results guy. So I spend capital in order to gain capital based on the results we get. Again, this is a concept that will we're quickly rounding the corner, so I appreciate you staying here with me so far. But one example that will really round this out is actually a scene from Cars. Okay, now my kids love this movie, and I made this point because I can't continue to watch Disney movies and other kid shows without losing my mind. Okay, parents will go through this on every group I've ever been a part of. We'll talk about this at some point. But at the end of this first movie, Cars 1, Tex, the owner of Dynaco, ends up offering Lightning McQueen the job. Hey, be our guy. Now, of course, he doesn't take it. You guys, I'm not going to give you a spoiler alert if you haven't seen it by now. I'm sorry, right? But seeing how Tex thought that Lightning was a good guy, and seeing how he just pushed the king over the finish line and generated a huge amount of media buzz about Dynaco, like Tex has an offer. He leans in with the classic, especially when Lightning McQueen turns it down. Of course he doesn't take it. He's going to be Lightning McQueen. He's his own person. Great. But Tex, seeing all these things happen, he leans in with the classic, if there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. Now, Lightning does the right thing. He cashes that favor in immediately. And in the next scene, you see Mater being flown around in a helicopter, which then generates political capital for Lightning McQueen because he kept his promise and all that other stuff, right? But in this situation like this, you must use that favor immediately. It's gotta be reasonable, lest you spend more goodwill that you're never going to get back. But this must be immediate. Why? Because Lightning wasn't going to provide any further gain to Tex, like not any real way that we could predict. Tex liked him now, but in a few months after the luster of the favor that Lightning did to him had gone, had done all this stuff that Lightning had done for the brand, would eventually fade. He's not going to be this great Lightning McQueen again. He's a nice guy. Great. The perceived worth of Lightning's goodwill wasn't going to be that much over time. After too long, the favor owed becomes worthless. So how does this relate to men? Men, we are doers. Okay? That includes the necessity to utilize help in the right ways. Our responsibility to use the right means to get the job done while maintaining an effective timeline. That's what makes us benefits. When my wife asked me to get things done, unfortunately, again, my honey-do list is always going to be populated with something. But if things stay on there too long, the effectiveness that I'm providing the family starts to, they start to question that a little bit. I've got crazy credit. I've gotten crazy things done for the family. I drop things and juggle things. Like, that's where my value comes. I find fulfillment in providing that stuff to the family. Now, it's our responsibility to use these right means to get things done. And in our interactions, we're striving to be a benefit. From a philosophical standpoint, this isn't exactly the virtuous argument, right? It's utilitarian, to strive to be a benefit to those around you so that you can wield political capital later. It's effective. It's not necessarily virtuous. It's not for the sake of good. But it has its place. And in the main, we need to be net benefits to those around us. And we can use this to gauge the people around us. We can see, we can feel, we can perceive. We can perceive the value that other people provide. And if they aren't providing a net value to the people around them in goodwill or in support, however you choose to manage that, whatever you value, that's why this is a subjective thing. You will be able to see who or what people are. Right? Now, again, has this place. You're able to start seeing whether or not you're being greedy and asking for help. You'll be able to see how you affect other people that rely on you and whether or not you're having a positive impact on them. Are you being the man that they need? Being able to articulate the feeling of a person is a powerful tool, right? I mentioned you'll be able to kind of get a feel for people. It's almost like being able to see the essence of somebody's core, right? It's active intel that you can use. And you can use that to either see allies or you can see people who are going to be a drain on you. Back to the Aaron Rodgers situation, I don't know how this is going to go, to be honest with you. As a Packer fan, I'd like to see him leave. Like this will help Green Bay focus on their real problems, like their defense is struggling. When Aaron's not there making crazy plays, like the team doesn't do well. That's a problem. That's I think the difference between Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady for so long. Tom Brady has had he's had people around him. Now, I'm not saying he's not the GOAT, because Tom Brady is the GOAT, but Aaron Rodgers has done extremely well given the situation. With someone who's capable of turning bad situations into touchdown, it's hard to see your own faults. I need Green Bay to do that. And if that takes Aaron Rodgers leaving and having them start this whole process over again with a new guy, I'm for it. I think he'll be happier. No one wants that leader, that Brett Favre guy. No one wants a leader who doesn't want to be there. Right? The flip side, maybe Aaron Rodgers has spent all of his political capital with the organization. He's had several just okay years, but otherwise the team peters out around the NFC Championship. For a guy who can't seem to get his team to close the deal or across the goal line, so to speak, he's not generating nearly what a 3-time MVP should, especially if he's, still at his A game. That's a problem, especially when you start demanding things. So Terry Bradshaw was right to point out that Aaron shouldn't be threatened by Jordan Love, this new first-round draft pick, from last year. What he should be worried about is whether or not his organization can see him leading his team to a Super Bowl or not. Let's see how calm Aaron can stay while these things play out. That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Glenn Kowalski. One final note for today. We will not be airing a show next week. If we're able to get one off early, great, but it doesn't feel like that's going to be the case, and we've got some stuff going on. So enjoy your week off. I hope you don't enjoy it too much. Come back and see us the week after. If you like this show, please give us a 5-star review. It really helps us get the word out. Also, please subscribe or follow us for free on Apple Podcasts, Rumble, YouTube, or wherever else you get your content. Good luck out there.